On the sweltering morning of May 31st, 2017, the sun rose over Pensacola, Florida, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. The Jones family's modest apartment complex was waking up to another ordinary day. 12-year-old Naomi Jones, a bright and cheerful girl known for her infectious smile, had been up early, helping her mother, Shanta Craig Jones, prepare breakfast for her two younger brothers. As she watched her mother leave for work, Naomi promised she would look after her brothers and keep them entertained until their mother returned. It was a promise she had kept many times before, but this day would be different. Naomi had always been a responsible child, often taking on more than her fair share of household duties. Her mother, a single parent working long hours to provide for her children, relied heavily on Naomi's maturity. That morning, as Naomi waved goodbye to her mother from the porch, a slight breeze rustled through the trees, offering a brief respite from the oppressive heat. Naomi stood there for a moment, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin, before turning back inside to her brothers. She had plans to make them lunch and maybe watch a movie later in the afternoon. But as the hours passed, an inexplicable unease began to settle over the household. Around noon, Naomi decided to step outside for some fresh air. She told her brothers she would be right back, but as minutes turned into an hour, the boys grew worried. They called out for their sister, their small voices echoing in the stillness, but there was no answer. The apartment complex was eerily quiet, with only the faint hum of distant traffic breaking the silence. When Shanta received the frantic call from her sons, her heart sank. She raced home, her mind flooded with fear and panic. Shanta burst through the door of her apartment, calling Naomi's name, but was met with silence. Her sons were terrified, their eyes wide with confusion. They explained that Naomi had simply stepped outside and never came back. Shanta's first thought was that maybe Naomi had gone to a friend's house, but a quick check of the usual spots yielded nothing. As the minutes ticked by with no sign of her daughter, Shanta's dread deepened. She knew Naomi wouldn't just leave, something was terribly wrong. She called the police, her voice trembling as she explained that her daughter was missing. The local authorities were quick to respond, recognizing the urgency of a missing child case. Officers arrived within minutes and began canvassing the area, questioning neighbors, and searching nearby wooded areas and alleys. The residents of the apartment complex were shaken by the news. Naomi was well known in the community, a friendly, polite girl who never caused trouble. The thought that she could just vanish in broad daylight was unthinkable. As word of Naomi's disappearance spread, more and more people joined the search. Volunteers scoured the nearby woods, while others formed search parties to comb through the surrounding neighborhoods. The community was united in their efforts, driven by the hope that Naomi would be found safe and sound. But as the hours dragged into the evening, hope began to wane. By nightfall, there was still no trace of Naomi. The police set up a command center at the apartment complex, and a team of detectives was assigned to the case. The FBI was contacted and soon joined the search, bringing with them advanced technology and expertise in missing child cases. Shanta, exhausted and desperate, stayed up all night, praying for her daughter's safe return. She couldn't shake the feeling that Naomi was out there, somewhere, calling out for her. The next morning, the search resumed with renewed vigor. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the dense woods and waterways for any sign of Naomi. Divers were sent into nearby creeks and lakes, while bloodhounds were brought in to follow Naomi's scent. But despite the massive search effort, there were still no leads. It was as if Naomi had vanished into thin air. On the third day of the search, the investigators received a tip that sent chills down their spines. A neighbor reported seeing a man loitering near the apartment complex around the time Naomi disappeared. The description matched Robert Howard, a man with a criminal record who lived in the same complex. Robert was the boyfriend of Lauren Ying, a woman who lived just a few doors down from the Jones family. He was a familiar face in the area, often seen around the complex, but something about him had always seemed off. When detectives dug into Robert's past, they discovered a disturbing history. In 1999, Robert had been convicted of assault in Alabama and had served 15 years in prison. Since his release, he had been on the offender registry, a fact that sent shockwaves through the community. How could someone with such a dark past have been living among them without anyone knowing? The FBI decided to bring Robert in for questioning. At first, Robert was calm and cooperative. He provided an alibi, claiming he had been at the gym the morning Naomi disappeared and then at his girlfriend's apartment. But as detectives pressed him for more details, his story began to unravel. He mentioned making several trips between Pensacola and a friend's house, which seemed unnecessary and suspicious. The detectives sensed something was off. Why would he travel back and forth so many times in such a short period? The pressure on Robert mounted. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his car and apartment. Inside, they found a chilling clue, a lock of dark brown hair that matched Naomi's. Forensic tests later confirmed it was Naomi's hair. The discovery was a turning point in the investigation. It became clear that Robert was more than just a person of interest. He was the prime suspect. As the evidence against him grew, Robert's demeanor changed. He became defensive, his calm exterior cracking under the weight of the investigation. He insisted he was being framed. But the detectives weren't buying it. They knew they were close to a breakthrough. Surveillance footage from a nearby store showed Robert's car near the area where Naomi's body would eventually be discovered. Cell phone records placed him near the bridge where the fisherman had found Naomi's body on the day she disappeared. On June 5th, 5 days after Naomi vanished, the case took a devastating turn. Two fishermen, casting their lines off a bridge over 8 Mile Creek, noticed a foul smell coming from the water. As they peered over the edge, they saw something floating just below the surface. Their hearts sank as they realized it was a body, a small, lifeless body. Naomi had been found. The discovery was a gut-wrenching blow to the community. Naomi's body was pulled from the creek, her clothing torn and dirty. It was a heartbreaking sight, one that no parent should ever have to witness. Shanta, upon hearing the news, collapsed in grief. The loss was unbearable. Naomi was her baby, her firstborn, the light of her life. How could someone do this to her? An autopsy confirmed what everyone had feared. Naomi had been assaulted and strangled. The medical examiner's report was graphic, detailing the horrific injuries Naomi had suffered in her final moments. The news sent shockwaves through Pensacola. The town was in mourning, but there was also a growing sense of anger. People wanted justice for Naomi. With the case now officially a homicide, the focus of the investigation shifted entirely to Robert Howard. Detectives pieced together a chilling timeline of events. They learned that Robert had been watching Naomi for weeks, if not months. He had seen her playing outside, laughing with her brothers, and dancing on the back deck, completely unaware that she was being watched by a predator. On that fateful day, Robert had seen his opportunity. He lured Naomi away from her home, promising her something, a toy, a game, no one knows for sure. What is certain is that he took her to a secluded spot, assaulted her, and ended her young life. He then dumped her body in the creek, thinking it would never be found. Confronted with the overwhelming evidence, Robert finally broke down. He confessed to the crime in a chillingly detached manner, describing how he had grabbed Naomi when she went outside to play, driven her to a remote location, and killed her. His confession was cold and emotionless, devoid of any remorse or regret. Robert Howard was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, abduction, and assault. His trial was swift, and the jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never walk free again. For Naomi's family, the verdict brought some sense of closure, but it could never erase the pain of losing their beloved daughter. Naomi's death left a void that could never be filled. She was gone, but her memory lived on in the hearts of those who loved her. The small town of Pensacola would never be the same. The community was left to grapple with the loss, to make sense of a senseless act of violence. But in the wake of this tragedy, there was also a renewed sense of determination, a commitment to protecting their children, to ensuring that something like this could never happen again. Naomi Jones was more than just a victim. She was a vibrant, loving, and caring young girl who touched the lives of everyone she met. Her spirit, her joy, and her kindness would never be forgotten. The town of Pensacola vowed to remember Naomi not for how she died, but for how she lived, a bright light that shone too briefly in a world that could not contain her. And so Naomi's story, though tragic, became a rallying cry for justice, a reminder of the preciousness of life.